Thank you everyone for joining me for the presentation. My name is Marta and I work for a nonprofit organization called the Peregrine Fund, which is dedicated to conserving birds of prey around the world. And today I'm going to be talking about the work that we're doing with a critically endangered bird of prey that is endemic to the island of Hispaniola, which of course encompasses the countries of Haiti and Dominican Republic. One of the things that I want to mention, apart from the ridge-faced hawk being a critically endangered species, I think it's important to highlight the role that all birds of prey play in the ecosystem in which they live. They help maintain the balance, they help control and maintain healthy prey populations. And as top predators, they're really important, especially in the Caribbean, because in the Caribbean, we kind of lack some of the major land predators that they have in other parts of the world. And so birds of prey actually take on that role that other top predators would play in other parts of the world. So here we have the ridge-faced hawk on the left and a few of the other birds of prey that we can find commonly throughout the entire Caribbean. So returning to the ridge-faced hawk specifically, as I mentioned, it's critically endangered. When we first began working with this species in the year 2000, there were an estimated only 200 to 300 individuals left in the world. And I'd like to draw your attention to the map at the bottom of the screen. You can see the map on the left. All those red points represent the general distribution of this species, sorry, its general historic distribution. When we began working in 2000, as indicated in the map on the right, there's only one dot, and we only knew of one remaining population, which was in the Los Haitises National Park in Dominican Republic. So this in and of itself is a major threat to the species, having one small isolated population. If something were to happen, such as a hurricane, a large forest fire, disease, that could actually wipe out the species in one fell swoop. Other threats that we discovered, of course, sadly, poaching by humans. A lot of people will kill these hawks, sometimes to eat them, but more often than not because these hawks do sometimes prey on small chickens. Another major threat that we discovered was the infestation of parasitic nest flies or botflies in nestlings, which has caused a huge mortality rate in the young. And of course, habitat loss and electrocution are some of the other threats this species is facing in the long term. So once we began working with the species and really discovered what the threats were, we set about creating some goals for the project. How did we want to help conserve this species? So the first one was increasing the abundance of the species. As I mentioned, there were only 200 to 300 individuals. So that's a very low number for a species. We wanted to work to make that number, increase that number, increase the distribution, no longer just having one isolated population, having several populations on the island. And then of course, sustainability. How can we make the project last in the long term? So those were our three main goals. And so just to touch upon a few of the things, really our project is, as I mentioned in the title, is very holistic. So we're usually really using a lot of different methods to conserve this bird of prey, but I'm just gonna focus on a few of the major ones. So the first one is increasing abundance. And one of the ways that we've done that is through this treatment of the botfly infestations. These are botflies that will lay their eggs in the nest. When the larvae hatches, they actually burrow into the skin of the young nestlings. Nestlings, as you know, just are covered in down feathers. And so it's very easy for the larvae to penetrate through those feathers and get into the skin. They then feed on the flesh and the muscle and the tissue of these young birds. Without treatment, it causes an extremely high mortality rate in young. So working with a biologist named Marta Quiroga, who has worked with these botfly species in other parts of the world, has been collaborating with us for the past 3 years. And we've tried several different treatments, starting with fipronil, which required weekly treatments of the nestlings after hatching, from hatching until they fledged, which, as you can imagine, was a lot of manpower and also created a lot of stress for the nestlings and for the adults, because our team would have to climb into the trees every week. So we actually recently, a few years ago, switched to fipronil, which is Permacap is another name that you might know it by. And this has worked extremely well. It only requires one treatment at the egg stage. So approximately 1 week before the eggs are set to hatch, our team members climb up into the nest, carefully remove the eggs. They'll spray the area around the nest with Permacap. After that dries, they'll set the eggs back into the nest, come down, and that treatment lasts the entire breeding season. So those chicks usually fledge, and we've seen every once in a while we have a nestling with 1 or 2 botflies, but for the most part, they're 100% botfly free. And this has helped increase nestling survival fourfold. So that's really helped increase the number of birds that we have in the population. The second goal was to increase the distribution of the hawks. So in the map, you can see where Los Haitises National Park is. That's the site of the last remaining population of hawks. And our goal was to create additional populations. So we're working in the area of Punta Cana in Dominican Republic, where we've been releasing hawks since 2009. And then in Endangered Ridgway National Park, where we've released hawks for the first time in 2019. Our goal was to release more hawks there this year, but because of COVID, we suspended those releases, and hopefully we'll be able to do them in 2021. So just to explain a little bit about how this reintroduction process works, it's actually called assisted dispersal. And what we do is we pull young birds from the wild nest in Los Haitises National Park. Ridgway's hawks generally lay between 1 to 3 eggs. And so we try to pull young from a nest that has at least 2 nestlings. So we can pull 1 nestling and leave the other one for the adults to continue to raise. We usually have a group of about between 5 and 7 or 8 birds that are relatively the same age, given a day or 2 age difference. And we place them in what we call, it's an artificial nest or a hack box. And you can see in the photo at the bottom right what the hack box looks like. So the birds will spend a week to 10 days in that box. When we pull the birds, they're not yet ready to fly. So during this time, during those 7 to 10 days, they'll spend a lot of time exercising, flapping their wings, and just getting used to the environment around them. Of course, we feed them every day, and each bird receives a band so that we can identify them upon their release. After that time period passes of about 10 days, when they're naturally ready to fly, when they would fledge naturally from a wild nest, we open up the door to the artificial nest box, and we continue to place food around. So the birds now are used to getting food at this site. They're used to returning. So they'll come out of the box, they'll feed, and little by little, they'll start to investigate their surroundings, but continue to come back every day for food. After about a month or so, they'll actually start practicing to hunt on their own. And we can see that many times that they're doing that, trying to catch lizards, trying to catch insects. And eventually, just through this practice, they become independent because they always know they can come back to this site for food if they need it. Eventually, they'll stop coming to the site on their own. And after about 2 to 3 months, they're completely independent, and they don't return to the site at all. And that has worked really well. And so our third goal is sustainability. So how can we maintain this project going? How can we create a culture of conservation, support a culture of conservation that already exists in Dominican Republic? One of the best ways for us to do that is by engaging the community members. So about 99% of our staff is comprised of local field technicians and biologists that live in communities surrounding Ridgway's hawk habitat. We have about approximately 22 crew members at the moment, and they do basically all the field work. They do the tree climbing, they do the nest searching, data entry, they band the young, they treat the young for Philornis. So they're really in the field. They're the ones doing the work and really taking pride and ownership of the conservation of this species. Apart from having people work directly on the project, we also employ people in the communities to help us with other services. A lot of times we're in the field, we have to leave at 4:30 in the morning, and sometimes we're not back until 8 at night or night. So we have people in the communities that help us by preparing lunch for us. Sometimes we need people to go into town and pick up supplies for us. And all of those people are paid for their services, and that really helps bring in some additional income to the communities. Another thing I mentioned was that the Ridgway's hawks will predate on young chickens. So another part of our program is to supply free of charge chicken coops to locals in the communities near Ridgway's hawks habitat. And you can see a chicken cage in the photo on the left-hand side. And everyone who receives a chicken coop, they don't have to pay anything, it's theirs, free of charge. They only have to sign a promissory note saying that they won't kill any Ridgway's hawks or any birds of prey, that they won't use those cages to house any wild animals, that only they can keep their chickens in there. And that's been very successful because the Ridgway's hawks can only take young chicks. So once 2 or 3 weeks pass and the chickens are too large for the Ridgway's hawk, then the owners can let them out and they can run free again, and they're too big for a Ridgway's hawk to prey on. We also do workshops. The bottom right photo is of a jewelry making workshop that one of our crew members taught to give community members additional ways to earn income. One of the most important things that we're working on is environmental education. So we go to schools, to communities, door to door, really talking with the people and trying to create fun and educational activities for children and adults alike. We use a lot of art. We bring children to the release site. They can see live Ridgway's hawks. We do a lot of birding activities, a lot of nature walks as well. And this has really been important, getting kids inspired to care about the Ridgway's hawk. One of the things that I'm most proud of and that I really enjoy doing is our teacher training workshops. So we bring teachers from various schools around the country, and they spend anywhere from 2 to 4 days, depending on which workshop we do, learning about the importance of birds of prey, the importance of the Ridgway's hawk. We go out birding, we play games, and really they learn not only about the importance of raptors. Many of them have never even heard of the Ridgway's hawk, but they also learn different educational techniques and how they can do different activities and use raptors to teach about math and science and language arts. So it's really fun. And the idea is that they'll then go back to their classrooms and teach their students about Ridgway's hawks. So what are some of the results of our efforts over these past 20 years? So for our goal to increase the abundance of the species, this is just focused on Los Haitises National Park. Just to give you an idea, when the crew that I'm with now, we all started together in 2011. There were 37 pairs that we were monitoring and only 18 fledglings that year. Last year, 2019, we were monitoring 144 pairs and had 126 young birds fledge or fly for the first time. So that is a huge increase in the population in Los Haitises National Park. And we're still compiling the numbers for 2020. So sorry, these are last year's numbers, but these year's numbers will be similar. Perhaps a little bit lower because of COVID, but pretty similar. As far as increasing the distribution, I'm specifically going to talk about Punta Cana because we've been there the longest. As I mentioned, we started releasing there in 2009. We released a total of 128 hawks between then and now. As you can imagine, we have experienced some mortality, but to date this year we had 18 pairs that produced 21 fledglings just this year. And in total, we've had them produce more than 50 young birds. And we're really seeing those young birds that, fledged several years ago now have their own nests and are fledging their own young. So this is really becoming a burgeoning population of Ridgway's hawks in Punta Cana. Our community engagement, as I mentioned, we have 20 local biologists, more than 20 working on our project. We've distributed hundreds of chicken coops in the areas where we're working. And I really want to point out how important our field crew is. And that really was shown this year when neither myself nor our project manager could travel to DR. Our local crews did 100% of the field work, and they did an amazing job. So that training, that passion that they have really showed through this year. And finally, environmental education program. We really started full swing with education in 2013 after a few of our hawks ended up shot. So we've reached over 13,000 individuals. We've trained over 125 teachers. We're working currently in 52 communities with over 20 schools. And we've really seen this impact just in the reduction of hawks that are shot by humans in the areas that we're working. So we're really seeing, of course, this is going to be a long, long effort. Don't change hearts and minds overnight, but we're really seeing a change through these efforts so far. So that's our project in a nutshell. There was way more to talk about, but we don't have a lot of time. So I just want to thank you for participating. And I especially want to thank, of course, all our partners that you can see listed here, but in particular Birds Caribbean and the Betty Peterson Conservation Fund, which has really helped support our work over the past few years. Thank you.